Tales of Mithrym.
Scales of Justice, read by Ennatos. Part 4, Obstruction. The day was drawing on as the three of them made their way to the embassy building. The street on which it sat was, in point of fact, a large open square. Unlike the majority of other such spaces, this one was unused by any market vendors or traders. Even pedestrians seemed to stay to the sides, rather than crossing the center, which, in testament to the foreign embassies surrounding it, had been decorated with elaborate fountains and statues of white marble which shone in the sun. The embassy of Angmark was one of many, joined in an unbroken muse of tall structures which extended around the entire square. The heavy spruce door, enhanced with intricate brass carvings, sat open, and inside, a long hall, tiled like a chessboard, led up to a heavy oak desk. Behind the desk sat a young woman, dressed in the robes of the Order of Ibis. In front of her were a variety of papers, and beside her, floating in the air, was an open leather-bound book of parchment and a fine peacock feather quill. "Ah, good afternoon," she greeted Elvin as he stepped up to the desk. Behind him, Derville and Ducky sat quietly waiting. As she spoke, the quill began to scratch its way across the book. Thin, spidery, and very precise letters formed and dried almost instantly on the page. Elvin had grown quite used to the administrators of the orders, and had learned to pay this little heed. "Lieutenant Elvin Ranley, ma'am," he said with a slight bow. "And this is Miss Derville Aneth and Ducky Repton. We have come to follow up on our application for proof of agency." "I see. One moment." The quill scratched again at the paper, and the woman began to look over her desk. "I am afraid I do not seem to have your application here. Are you quite sure you have not received a response at your lodgings?" "Indeed," Elvin smiled. "Very well." The woman stood up. The book floated higher to keep level with her. "It is likely with one of the civil servants at the moment. Let me just see what I can find out for you." Elvin bowed again, and the woman turned and left, her ledger following as she did. Elvin looked up at the ceiling and started to whistle tunelessly. Derville and Ducky sighed. "Same as every other time," Derville said under her breath. Elvin was about to respond when he was suddenly jolted to attention. "Ranley!" A voice bellowed across the hall. It belonged to a well-dressed military officer, in a similar uniform to Elvin himself. "Lieutenant Ranley, is that you? How name's name are you, young man?" Elvin smiled a genuine smile. "Captain Gregory," he called back. "My word, man. Last thing I'd heard, they'd drummed you out on some trumped-up medical chit. What brings you to Knarth?" "Enjoying my retirement, sir." Elvin shook the captain's hand. "Off seeing the world, sir." "Is that so?" Captain Gregory smiled. "Hardly had you pegged as a man to do the tour, Rodney. Still, good on you. Have you been far yet?" "No further than this town yet, sir. Seem to be a bit stuck here." "Oh," the captain chuckled. "Sport of bother with your paperwork, eh?" "Yes, sir." "Well, I dare say we can," he winked, "expedite things a bit for you and your, friends." Ducky snarled. "Oh, do you think you could, sir?" Elvin's heart leapt. Just then, though, the room seemed to spin as a familiar voice cut through the air. "I hope you are not planning on circumventing civic authority, Captain." The voice was dry and cold, and filled to the brim with its own self-importance. Captain Gregory stiffened and saluted. "Certainly not, sir," he said stiffly. Just a bit of banter between officers. The administrator had returned with a middle-aged man dressed in wizarding robes and a brass chain. Ducky growled again. Notley, Derville whispered under her breath. You may go about your business, Captain. I am dealing with these matters personally, Notley said with a dismissive wave of his hand. The captain saluted again, looking at Elvin. He gave a slight shrug, turned on the spot, and walked away. Mr. Notley, Elvin began. Chancellor, Notley broke in quickly. Chancellor Notley. My apologies, sir, Elvin corrected himself. I must say it seems like a lifetime since we were on that confounded vessel together. Yes, thankfully the time is passing. Unfortunately, the memory seems to be forever lodged in my mind. He scowled at Derville. Some things take longer to heal than bruises. Elvin sighed to himself and forced a smile. I was not aware you handled matters like this yourself, sir. As a matter of fact, I do not. Notley moved round and sat behind the desk. He arched his fingers and looked up at the three of them. But I decided to take an interest, as they say, in this case. Your names are, how shall I put it? He paused, then emphasized. Known to the kingdom since your escapades, and it is necessary to take proper steps. You will, I'm afraid, just have to be patient. He leaned forward and smiled. Take your time to enjoy yourselves. Why not take in the sights of the city? This really is a very remarkable place, Mr. Ranley. Lieutenant, Elvin corrected, almost instinctively. Notley's smile broadened. Not any more, it would seem. We are doing our best to subsist here, sir, Elvin continued. But these are not easy circumstances, and there's hardly much work for those without documents. Well, I'm afraid I really cannot help with that. Notley leaned back. You should really consider these sort of things before traveling. Still, I understand you are making quite the name for yourselves helping out the wardens. You may yet earn your rank again. I am not a warden, sir, nor do I intend to remain and become one here, Elvin said, straightening up. Aye to that. Ducky and Derville looked at each other. Besides, Elvin continued, I understand that the Patriarch is making most of the wardens redundant with the new flying regiment. Notley chuckled. And you do not fancy joining the wardens of the air? I do not much care for flying, sir. Well, Mr. Ranley, I'm afraid I really cannot help you any further. Notley stood up and began to walk away. You have entered this country without papers and will just have to wait for due process. I need to satisfy myself that you are, in fact, worthy of representing the kingdom to the world. Until then, you and your companions are under the jurisdiction of the city. Good day. Why, that jumped up little. Ducky's voice began to rise. Again, they heard a scratching sound as the ledger behind the administrator began writing. I think perhaps we should continue this outside. Elvin put an arm around Ducky, and the three of them made to leave.
Tales of Mithrym are written by Jimmy Clephane. Mithrym is a fantasy world built for the Dungeon Room role-playing game system. To find out more about the world of Mithrym, or to try out the game, go to www.mithrym.com.